Hello, my name is Pooja. Welcome to a new episode of Around the World. In this program, we take cognizance of international developments thrice a week. We bring you stories that enhance your political understanding. We will talk about one such global issue in today's story. The race to become a global power is quite intriguing. Every country in the world wants to become a global power, and for this purpose, they either make an ally an adversary or an adversary an ally. US politics also revolves around this race of power. It can be witnessed in the relationship of the US with Iran. Whenever Democrats come to power in the US, then they start improving relations of the US with Iran. On the contrary, whenever the Republicans form the government in the US, then the conflict between the US and Iran reaches its peak. The then US President Barack Obama had signed a nuclear deal with Iran in 2015, but when Donald Trump became the US President, he pulled out of this deal in 2018. Now the current US President Joe Biden is planning to restore the nuclear deal with Iran. Recently, a negotiation was concluded regarding the restoration of Iran's nuclear deal in the Austrian capital, Vienna. The final draft of the Iran nuclear deal has been prepared. In view of this, Iran has recently given its written response to the final draft for the restoration of the agreement with global powers. It is expected that this deal will be restored soon. Against this backdrop, several significant questions arise. Firstly, what is the Iran nuclear deal? Secondly, how this deal is cardinal for Iran and other countries involved in the deal. We will discuss all these aspects in today's story. Let us first of all try to understand the background of the Iran nuclear deal. The genesis of this agreement is linked to the Islamic Revolution. It was the same revolution through which Ayatollah Khomeini came to power in Iran, and Iran emerged as an Islamic republic. With this revolution, the relations between the US and Iran came to an end. The US was on Iraq's side even during the Iraq-Iran war in 1980. The popularity of Khomeini grew after the war, and the conflict between the US and Iran also escalated. The conflict intensified when the US shot down an Iranian passenger plane flying from Tehran to Dubai in 1988. After the Iran-Iraq war that lasted 8 years, Iran devoted all its strength to equip itself with nuclear power. In 2002, the world came to know about Iran's nuclear program for the first time. Consequently, the then US President George Bush started imposing all kinds of economic sanctions on Iran. He also termed the trio of Iran, Iraq and North Korea as the axis of evil. He also accused these countries of spreading terrorism, supporting extremists, and manufacturing nuclear weapons. When Hassan Rouhani came to power in Iran in 2013, he accelerated his strategies towards lifting sanctions on Iran. Iran's nuclear deal, that is, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was signed on 14th July 2015. The P5+1 countries, the European Union and Iran had signed this agreement. Countries like China, France, Germany, Russia, and the United Kingdom are included in P5. When the US joins this group, then it is known as P5+1. Under this deal, the sanctions imposed on Iran were lifted. In return, Iran pledged not to develop nuclear weapons. Iran was banned from purchasing weapons for 5 years, and the missile sanctions deadline was fixed at 8 years. Iran also agreed to global surveillance of its nuclear plants. All these steps were taken for ensuring that Iran's nuclear program is used for peaceful purposes only. Furthermore, Iran has many important nuclear power plants. At present, the global monitoring of these nuclear plants is done by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is IAEA. Bushehr's nuclear power plant is Iran's first commercial nuclear reactor. The nuclear power plant located near the Persian Gulf in the southern end of Iran was started in 1974 with Germany's assistance. Arak is a heavy water reactor and production plant located in the central west of Iran. Nuclear plants such as Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan are located at some distance in the center of Iran. Iran's largest uranium enrichment program is carried out in its Natanz plant. A uranium enrichment plant is also established in Qom. There are nuclear research reactors, Bonab, Ramsar and Tehran. In addition, Gachin, 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐡𝐭𝐢 and 𝐷 are some of the major uranium mines in Iran. A pertinent question arises at this juncture why the rest of the world, especially the US, has always opposed Iran's uranium enrichment program. Under the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran was given the exemption of uranium enrichment only up to 3.67%. However, when Donald Trump pulled out of this deal, citing national interest, then Iran strongly condemned the US decision. According to Trump, this deal can curtail Iran's nuclear activities for a fixed time only. He also held that this deal will fail to prevent Iran from developing missiles and nuclear weapons. After the US pulled out of this deal, Iran threatened to reduce its commitments under the deal and end all limits on research and development for nuclear enrichment. Moreover, Iran has violated the terms of this deal on several occasions. At present, Iran has greatly accelerated its uranium enrichment works. As a result, Iran has now exceeded the fixed rate of exemption on uranium enrichment. By the beginning of 2021, this rate increased to 20%. Later, this rate increased unprecedentedly and crossed the 60% limit. Notably, about 90% uranium enrichment rate is required to develop nuclear weapons. In such a scenario, many Western countries fear that Iran can make a nuclear bomb through this nuclear program and can cause huge destruction in the world. Israel is also at odds with Iran due to its nuclear program. Actually, Iran does not accept the existence of Israel, and Israel considers Iran's nuclear program as a threat to its existence. It has also been reported in news several times that Israel has conducted attacks on Iran's nuclear bases. However, many countries are in favor of the resumption of Iran's nuclear deal under certain conditions so that Iran's uranium enrichment program and nuclear power manufacturing can be controlled. On the other hand, Iran wants to get rid of the sanctions imposed on it. At the same time, Iran also wants the US not to back down from its commitments. Iran wants full reassurance that if the deal is resumed, then the future US administration will also adhere to it. However, history is witness to the fact that the US has never lived up to its promise. Besides the US, China and Russia are also supporting the nuclear deal in view of their respective interests in the region. There is no doubt that the US seems to be diverting its attention from the Middle East these days. In such a scenario, China and Russia are engaged in strengthening their relations with Iran. For instance, Iran has been made a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, another pertinent question arises that how Iran's nuclear deal is cardinal for India. If this nuclear deal gets resumed, then undoubtedly the US sanctions on Iran will be lifted. With the lifting of these sanctions, economic and strategic ties between India and Iran will be strengthened again. It cannot be denied that Iran acts as a gateway to the Central Asia. In such a scenario, regional connectivity between the two countries will also get momentum. India has been importing oil mainly from Iran. However, oil imports to India were disrupted after the global sanctions got imposed on Iran. Consequently, many countries of the world, including India, also had to face a huge increase in oil prices. India's infrastructure projects in Iran, which were put on hold after the sanctions, will also be revived. Through Chabahar and Bandar Abbas ports, India will be able to curtail Chinese access to the Middle East and Central Asian countries. These ports will also aid in promoting bilateral trade between India and Iran. Trade routes will also be opened through road and rail networks to the Central Asian countries and Afghanistan. After the restoration of the nuclear deal, many countries of the world, including India, will feel regionally and strategically connected with Iran again. Let us now note down the question based on today's story. What is the Iran nuclear deal? Why do many countries of the world oppose this nuclear deal? Evaluate.